Is one. Let us march on till victory is won. It's hard to talk after that. Well, next, we're going to have our City Council person, Ray Wade, come and speak to you. Now, Ray, as you might know, is in his second term on the City Council, I believe, and he has spent so much time listening to his community and working with his community, figuring out the needs and addressing those needs. Just an example, recently he learned that the vaccinations, the COVID vaccinations, weren't being administered in his community. So he organized a drive-through vaccination clinic there at Broughton. He took that to them. He has spent so much time in an effort to make life better for his constituents. And I think we can all be thankful for that because it improves the lives of everyone in our city. This park is in his district, and you can see how beautiful it is, and I think it's a jewel for our city. So, thanks to Ray Wade.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hello, how are you? Good. My name is Ray Wade. I'm the City Council member for Longview District 3. You guys are sitting right now inside of T Park, which is in District 3. District 3, thank you very much. Yes, District 3 encompasses South Longview. And I am a very proud representative of South Longview, born and raised on Young Street in MLK. Been on the City Council. It's my first full term on City Council. And with that being said, because I won't keep you guys, because I know it's not my good-looking face you came here to see today, I'll just welcome you to Longview, to District 3, and welcome. Thank you for being here, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to brag on him just a little bit. Not only is our City Council person, but he also just got the Distinguished Alumni Award from Longview Independent School District, which is quite an honor. Next up, we have Philip Burns. And Philip is, well, I think most of you probably know Philip. He's grown up here, and he's one of those kind of people you can count on to get it done. When you need something done, he's there. And he's our newly elected Gregg County Democratic Chair. So he's serving his first term in that capacity. He's made changes, he's been very active, and I'm proud to introduce Philip Burns to you.
It is a privilege to be here, and especially to be amongst the two that's going to come after me. But first, I want to let you know that the Gregg County Democratic Party got some things over there for sale that we need your assistance. We got some chips, we got some hot dogs, we got some chili dogs, and also on the 26th of this month at the Justin Community Center, we'll have a fish fry fundraiser. Now, Justin got a lot of the other folks there. So we're going to go there and we're going to show them that we are there. Amen. All right. Now, what we need you to do before we leave, all our precinct chairs, raise your hand. All the precinct chairs, there are some out there. We need you to buy a ticket from them. It's $10 for the fundraiser. That's what we need you to do before you leave today. We got 300 tickets, and there's about 150 people here, plus 2 more coming up. So we need to get rid of those. Now, next, it is crucial that we vote, especially in Texas with the mess that we got down in Austin. So it's crucial that we get rid of them, and we got some people that we need you to vote for. There's not no sense if you got people in Austin that's going to say, if I give you a mail application, that's a felony. That's crazy and that's ludicrous. So we need to do our part to make sure that they don't go back and get reelected. And what it takes each and every one of us to go vote, to help register people to vote, and help take people to vote. That's all I got for you. But I'm a move on. I got to do something else. Give me a B.
B.
Give me an E. E. Give me a T. T. Give me a zero. What do you spell? Say it again. Give me a J. Give me an O. Give me an E. What do you spell? That's what we need.
Okay, that gets you fired up. Now, you know, I'll tell you what I want you to do. When you get a chance out there, I want you all to take a selfie, if you would. And if some of you that are my age don't exactly know how to do that, turn to that young person sitting next to you and get them to show you how to do it. And then I want you to post it to your social media. And if you are my age and you don't quite know how to post it to social media, talk to that person next to you, that young person, and get them to show you how. And use the hashtag for Powered by People or Joe Jaworski, and let's get that done so people can see that we are out here, that we're having a good time, and that we're supporting Powered by People, Joe Jaworski, and our other candidates. Thank you. Our next person up is Joe Jaworski. And I have to say, Joe, that Joe and I might have similar problems. You know, he's got a last name that's a little bit unusual, and with the name TV-Ball, I have an unusual last name. And, you know, I've been practicing law here 40 years now. And when I'm practicing, when I go and introduce myself to people in this area, I'm still asked, well, TV-Ball, are you the meat people? And that might seem like an odd question to you, Joe, because you don't know that my dad was the butcher here in town for 60 years. And he had the best steaks in town, gotta say. So people still refer to me as the meat people, despite having gone to law school, practiced law, and done all that I've done. So I suspect that Joe Jaworski gets asked a lot, hey, what relation are you to Leon Jaworski? Yeah. And so Leon Jaworski, as most of you probably know, but if you don't, I'm going to fill you in. Leon Jaworski was a Watergate special prosecutor. And Leon Jaworski, put it out there, was Joe Jaworski's grandfather. So that's really important. And I'm sure he's proud of that. But Joe Jaworski has a lot of accomplishments on his own. And I want to fill you in on those and tell you what he has accomplished on his own so that you'll be familiar with him as he's running for Attorney General in this state against Ken Paxton. Yeah. Okay, so it's my understanding that Joe went to school in North Carolina, to Davidson, and then went to University of Texas Law School, which I don't quite understand why he didn't go to Baylor, but yeah, that's a different story. But he's been practicing law in Texas for over 30 years. He owns the Jaworski Law Firm in Galveston, where he has a mediation practice, a very successful practice. He has been mayor of Galveston, where, as I understand it, he was very successful in rebuilding Galveston after a major storm. He spent his time working with his community, again, seeing the needs of the community and doing what it took to rebuild that community. He has the integrity that his grandfather had, and he wants to take that integrity and restore that integrity to our Attorney General's office. Because as you know, that integrity has evaporated under the leadership of Ken Paxton. So I'm going to turn it over to Joe Jaworski and let him tell you more about his plans as he's going to be our next Attorney General.
Madam Attorney, thank you so much for that introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, Longview, Texas, my name is Joe Jaworski. I'm running for Texas Attorney General, and I am asking for your vote. Actually, I'm asking for your vote twice, but not like that. The Texas Democratic primary next spring
and the general election, November 8th, 2022. We are coming on strong. That's going to be when it happens, folks. That's when you are going to help elect the first Democrat statewide in Texas in over a generation. You talk about University of Texas School of Law. Those of us who are attorneys and judges here will back me up on this one. Your third year is a lot easier than your first year. What I remember is in May 1991, 30 years ago, I was this close to graduating. Life was easy. I said to my wife, let me go do the grocery shopping. It was Wednesday at 11:30 a.m. I walked up Duval to 43rd and Duval at the Fresh Plus. Walked into produce, and oh my God, there she was. In produce, shopping, Governor Ann Richards.
Oh, yes.
And, you know, being the fanboy that I am, I went up and I said, Governor, I've got to introduce myself. Well, she immediately put me at ease. Joe, I knew your granddaddy. What's a shame about that is that I don't have a transcript of that conversation. How I wish I had a video or a transcript. But you know, Longview, what I do remember is how the governor made me feel that day in May 1991, 30 years ago. You remember that saying? You may not remember what someone said to you a long time ago, but you'll remember how they made you feel. Well, such is the case on this day. And the way the governor made me feel was validated. She heard me. Optimistic, and above all, Longview, what I felt 30 years ago, meeting the governor of the state of Texas in the produce section of Fresh Plus, was hope, with a capital H. And why not? I mean, there I was, this close to graduating from our great state law school, the University of Texas. I was going to be licensed in the fall, God willing. I did pass the bar. And we had a progressive government. We had a great governor. The future was so bright in May 1991. And then it was all downhill from there. 1994 brought us Karl Rove and George W. Bush. And here we are now in 2021 thinking how reasonable George W. is on immigration.
Yeah.
How far we've fallen, Texas. But here's my promise to you, all of you here on the knoll at Teague Park at the VFW Memorial. There is hope in Texas again. You feel it, don't you? Woo! Yeah, you do. I'll tell you why. Because the GOP, what used to be a grand old party, has overstayed their welcome.
Yes.
And I am here to tell you that all Democrats in Texas, reasonable Republicans who have just had enough of the clown car show, independents and libertarians, all of them, are going to create a coalition that is going to vote these men and some women out of office in November 2022. Woo! I'm here to tell you it's happening.
Yes.
And yes, even though they're going to try and pass this voter suppression bill, when you poke a bear, then sometimes get out of the way because what's about to come, you had no idea is coming. Here's what we need to do. Since you feel the hope and you know you have competent, integrity-based candidates running for statewide office, you need to redouble your efforts. This is what I want to say to Ken Paxton, who is so proud of his voter fraud unit. Mr. Paxton, I object. Yes, Counselor, state your objection. Voter fraud. It's nonsensical. It's a non sequitur. You're the voters. I'm the voter. Do you vote illegally? Anyone? Do you know anyone who ever voted illegally? Of course not. So I think what he means is election fraud. Now look, if there's somebody running for office who wants it so bad they'll break the law and try and fraud the vote, well, throw the book at them. Absolutely. We have laws and we can sentence those people. But much like the freeway, when you're on I-20 and people speed by, we have laws to keep you from doing that. But if you break the law, you get a ticket. But what the government doesn't do is shut the freeway down to one lane and make the traffic go at 20 miles an hour, do they? That's what they're doing with the vote, on the basis of the allegation of voter fraud. But we know there isn't voter fraud. All you have to do is look at Mr. Paxton's own website, where he proudly proclaims 651 successful prosecutions of voter fraud. Well now, ladies and gentlemen, Counselor, I'm sorry, I don't know what successful prosecution means, okay? That sounds like wordplay. I know what a conviction means, and I'm not even a criminal defense lawyer. So, Mr. Paxton, I have a question for you, sir. What is a successful prosecution? When you peel the onion back, you find out that it's really 190 or so people in question, and not even all of them were found guilty. But we'll use your number, Ken, 651. Since, the website says, 2004. How many votes have been cast, ladies and gentlemen, in Texas? You don't even have to use the local elections in May for the last 15 years. You don't have to use the constitutional referenda every now and then. You don't even have to use the primaries. Let's just use the 5 general elections and the 4 midterms held in Texas since 2004. It's 100 million votes. 651 successful prosecutions, according to our Texas Attorney General, divided into 100 million, yields an annoyingly small percentage that is even less than the dangerous stuff in the water we drink every day. I contend we don't have a voter fraud problem, we have a Ken Paxton problem. So here's my promise to you, ladies and gentlemen. When General Joe Jaworski takes the oath of office after you and I win this election in November 2022, I will take Ken Paxton's voter fraud division and turn it into General Jaworski's voter access division. Because in truth, you really ought to be able to call the government if you show up in line to vote at 6:45 p.m., but they close the doors to you at 7:15 before they reach you. You ought to be able to call the government if you sign your name, like you do, on your application to vote by mail, and you sign your name like you do on the actual ballot, but some busybody looks at it and says, these don't match, throw it out. You ought to be able to call the government when someone steps on your civil and voting rights. You see, government needs to catch up. Government needs to catch up. How many of y'all have 16, 17, 18-year-olds? You remember what glee they approach you with when it's time to get the driver's license? But 2 years later, when it's time to vote, where's that zeal? Hopefully some of you feel that. But did you know that there's a law in Texas, and it's been on the books since 1985, that says every high school principal in Texas, public, private, charter, is required to be a deputy voter registrar to offer registration to the senior class twice a year. Every high school in Texas, every 18-year-old. Lift every voice. And how many of them do it exactly? Why is the Attorney General sending letters to the city of Houston reminding the city, in the refuge of last resort after Hurricane Harvey, you better let people take their guns in there, otherwise I'm going to cite you for violating the Second Amendment. But he's not sending letters, and it could be a nice letter, to the high school principals saying, don't forget to register our youth. Yeah. That, in a nutshell, is an example of the difference between Ken Paxton and me. So ladies and gentlemen, let me conclude by restating my name. And yes, ma'am, my grandfather, Leon Jaworski, would be proud of me today, because I am so proud of him, the Watergate special prosecutor, who is remembered best for his contribution to American jurisprudence. No man is above the law. And last time I checked, that no man includes Ken Paxton. Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Jaworski, running for Texas Attorney General. I'm asking for your vote. Thank you so much.
Well, that gives you hope, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, Well, our next speaker, I just have to say, Nona Snotty. If anyone asked me to describe Nona Snotty with 2 words, I'd have to say, A, powerhouse. Because she's an amazing woman. She takes care of her constituents, she gets things done. She's served on our city council for a number of years now. And if you need something, she's your go-to woman in this town. I am proud to call her my friend and proud to call her a representative of our city. So here's Nona. Thank you. Thank you very much. There goes my speech.
Sometimes I want to ask God why He allows poverty, famine, and injustice when He could do something about it. But I'm afraid He might just ask me the same question. Good evening. I'm so excited and honored to once again welcome Beto O'Rourke back to Longview, Texas. Over the past several years, we have witnessed Beto's leadership, love, and service to our state and national communities as he seeks to advance and protect the right to vote for all Texans. We all should be fired up. The time is now. This is a critical period for Texas. Our voting rights are under attack and our democracy is on the line. It has been an honor to witness Beto, his journey and commitment to Texas as he navigates the political landscape to protect democracy. And given his efforts, I'm excited that he is back in East Texas, where there is so much work to do. So I'm going to get out of the way and allow Mr. Beto to come forth to discuss the work we must do. So please help me welcome, ladies and gentlemen, Beto O'Rourke.
Longview, how are we doing tonight? Feeling good? Well, I really appreciate what you did with the weather. Starting to rain, didn't know if we were going to be able to have this. If it were in El Paso, we would cancel school for the next week. I live in the Chihuahuan Desert, in the Rocky Mountains. We don't know what to do with that wet stuff and all this green stuff that you have here. On such a beautiful night to be with you is the pleasure and the honor of my life. Every time I've been here in Longview, you have been so warm and so welcoming to me and to my team and to those who have volunteered with us and for us and for the cause. And tonight and today has been no different. That is in large part due to the woman who is sitting right behind me on this stage, Mary Lou TV Ball. Who I don't know that she has an official title or position that says this, but as far as I'm concerned, it is running this part of the state for the rest of us. That's how I came out here in the first place. It was in 2017, maybe in January or February, early on. And we were at a meeting of other Democrats in Austin, not too far from the Capitol. And I walked over and introduced myself to Mary Lou, and she said, "You should come out to Longview." And I said, "Really? What is Longview?" We live 11 hours to your west, in another time zone for something. You receive it as an order, as a command, and you're going to follow through. And I did, and I came out here, and you really shocked me. Not only that I came 11 hours to be with you, but I was a complete unknown, fairly new member of Congress from West Texas, running against a guy who almost clinched the Republican nomination for the presidency, who was the junior senator from the state of Texas, in a state that last elected a Democrat to that position in 1988. No one felt like I had a snowball's chance on a hot day like this one to win that race. But you all showed up, and whether it was out of pity or encouragement, it fired me up. And it was on that day, early in 2017, that I knew we really had a shot to do something really special. And over the months and the year that followed, well into 2018, we built this operation up here in Longview, up in Texarkana, in Marshall, in all points in between, all the way down to Beaumont and curving around over to Houston. We brought millions of people into this democracy who had sat out or been forced out of every election previous in their life. At the end of the day, though we did not defeat Ted Cruz, we won more votes than any Democrat had won in the history of the state of Texas.
Yes.
We were the first Democrat to win the 4 major urban areas in the surrounding counties since Lyndon Baines Johnson did it in 1964. The voter turnout on that day in 2018 exceeded the last high water mark, which was in 1970 for a midterm election in the state of Texas. And young voter turnout, so for you young folks here, it was owing to you, was up 500% from the previous midterm election. And that's not all. You all know that we might not have won our race, but others won theirs. We elected 12 new Democrats to the state legislature, leaving us at a deficit of only 9. We helped Colin Allred in North Texas and Lizzie Panel Fletcher in the Gulf Coast replace the Republican incumbents that they ran against to serve our state and our country in the United States Congress. And in Harris County, just one county alone, we helped to elect 17 African American women to judicial positions, literally changing the face of criminal justice in the biggest, most diverse county in this state, one of the most important places anywhere in this country. And we did it together. It was not the candidate, and it was not the party, it was the people. It was all of us. We made that happen. And this is a moment that once again calls for the people. And it's, in fact, far more important than that moment that we fought so hard to win in 2018. Because our very democracy, the ability to freely choose those who will represent us as the next Attorney General, or the next member of Congress, or the next governor, or the next president, that ability to freely and fairly vote and decide who is going to represent us in positions of power and public trust is under attack unlike any time in our lifetimes. It is under attack unlike any time in the lifetime of this country. And we, the people, who in a government of, by, and for the people, it is on us to decide how we will distinguish ourselves or be found wanting in this effort. And if you're like me, you want to make sure that you give all you've got with what you have, where you are right now here in Longview, to make sure that we preserve this democracy, that those brave men and women in the different service branches that are honored when you come in by that American Legion sign into this park, those who 77 years ago this week landed on the beaches of Normandy, Democrats, Republicans, people like this gentleman in the far back, who defined themselves not by party, not by race, not by creed, not by immigration status, but by the fact that they were Americans and that they were literally willing to die to preserve this country and our great democracy. To those veterans out there, we thank you, we salute you, we are grateful for you. We could not do this without you. But I also want to acknowledge some other important Americans who made this democracy in this moment and our ability to gather and our participation in our politics possible for everyone. It was on this very day, 58 years ago, that Medgar Evers was shot down in Jackson, Mississippi. He was killed for trying to stand up for this democracy, for fighting for this democracy, though he did not wear a uniform at the moment. His struggle, his fight, his service, and his sacrifice was no less important than those men who landed on that beach just a few decades before him. When I think about Medgar Evers, when I think about those brave men who gave their lives for us on D-Day, when I think about everyone who's been in the struggle to make sure that all of us could be here right now, I realize that standing here on this day in 2021, I have been the beneficiary. I have inherited the sacrifice that they made, as have you, and as have every single one of us. That was an inheritance so dearly purchased and passed on, and it cannot be squandered. That's our choice to make at this moment. I want to tell you a story that I thought of today as we passed by, didn't get to stay in, Marshall, Texas. Marshall, Texas, more than a century ago, produced a guy that you may or may not have heard of named Lawrence Nixon. He was raised in Marshall, attended Wiley College, from which he graduated, went to Meharry Medical College in Tennessee, one of the few medical colleges you could go to as a black man in the early 1900s. Upon graduation, served for a little while as a physician in Cameron, Texas, until there was a horrific lynching in that community that Dr. Nixon was in part witness to. And so he left Cameron, did not come back to Marshall or East Texas, but instead came to the town in which I would be born in 1972, El Paso, Texas, to serve as a physician, as a community leader, and in the year 1910 of our Lord, ACP in the state of Texas, right there in El Paso. Dr. Nixon is working to make El Paso a better place, taking care of his patients, raising his young family, doing what all of us in our own capacity try to do with the limited time that we have here on this planet. When in 1923, the Texas legislature, in their wisdom, passes a law, a lifetime of some of those who are still with us today. It was called the all-white primary, and it said that if you were black, you couldn't vote in the Democratic primary. And those of you who know your history understand there was not a Republican Party at that time to speak of. The Democratic primary decided who your county commissioner would be, your member of Congress, your U.S. senator, your governor, the president who would win the electoral college vote out of this state. And we shut out an entire population, not by trickery or subterfuge, but literally black and white in the legislative code. It was in statute. Dr. Nixon, 1924, goes into his typical polling place on Texas Avenue in El Paso, Texas, trying to cast a ballot the same way he had in every single election since he'd arrived in El Paso in 1910. And the elections judge, who was very familiar with Dr. Nixon because he saw him at every election, said, "Dr. Nixon, you know I can't let you vote." And the way I read that story, I think it was tearing that guy up. He knew it was wrong, and he knew the law that he was enforcing was not a good one. And Dr. Nixon replied to him, "I know you can't, but I've got to try." And he did try. Though he wasn't allowed to cast his ballot on that day in 1924, he filed suit, and he took that case all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States of America, and he won it. And he didn't just win once, he won twice. But even after those two victories, and this really says something about our state and our country and about us as human beings, he still didn't have the right to vote. The Democratic Party was able to find their own rules within their own organization to prevent him and other African Americans from exercising their right and participating in the franchise. And it would not be until 1944, the same year that those men left this state to land on those beaches in Normandy, including African Americans among them, it was not until 1944 that right to vote was restored. For 20 years, he fought, he struggled, he sacrificed, he battled on until ultimately he was able to win. But as you know, part because of what I just told you about Medgar Evers, the fight wasn't over. By law, he might be able to vote. By practice and custom, in East Texas, in South Texas, in Mississippi, in Georgia, in the states of the former Confederacy, African Americans were functionally disenfranchised, unable to vote. And it was in 1964 that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and future Ambassador Andrew Young went to pay a visit on our fellow Texan, Lyndon Baines Johnson, who at the time was the occupant of the White House. And they said, Mr. President, though it says that we can vote, functionally we cannot. There are some counties in Mississippi where African Americans comprise 90% of the population, and there's not a single black voter on the rolls. How do you call yourself a democracy when so many millions of your fellow Americans cannot participate in it? Well, President Johnson, perhaps taken somewhat aback, said, you are right, and I would love to help you, but I cannot move this Congress to act. They'll never go for it, especially those senators and congressmen from the Deep South. So, gentlemen, I appreciate your time. I'm sorry to tell you, I do not have the power. Well, as Dr. King and Ambassador Young left the White House, Andrew Young turned to Dr. King and said, Martin, what do we do now? And apparently Dr. King turned to Andrew Young and said, we go out there and we find the president some power. And that's what they did over the course of the next year in communities just like this one in Longview, with people just like you and I. Maybe it was our grandparents or great-grandparents or our moms or our dads. Maybe it was some of you who are old enough to have been there at the time. Folks took to the streets. They lit up the switchboard at the White House to tell President Johnson what they wanted him to do. They called their members of Congress. They spoke to their U.S. senators. They confronted them at town hall meetings. They marched for democracy and the right to vote. And in fact, 1 week before President Johnson convenes a joint session of Congress to discuss voting rights, that would be on the 15th of March, 1965, a very young John Lewis, all of 24 years old, organizes a march from Selma to Montgomery to ensure that he too can stand up and be counted and fight and march and walk peacefully and nonviolently for the right to vote. Well, you all know what happened to him on that day, the 8th of March. He was beaten nearly to death within an inch of his life. So many others with whom he marched were beaten also. One person was actually killed in the process. And when Johnson begins that speech, not much more than a week later, he begins with Selma. He says, what happened in Selma can give us no pride. In fact, and I'm paraphrasing, it must compel us to act because all they were trying to do was secure the right to vote. And you, ladies and gentlemen of the United States Congress, the most august, powerful body on the face of the planet, you have the power to confer it to them. And so I ask you to do your job and to pass this bill, the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And you know what? They listened to President Johnson. They heard John Lewis. They realized that they had the power because the people in the country at that time gave it to them, made sure that there was no doubt that we were going to move forward with democracy. I tell you that story at this moment because if you're like me, we need some bucking up. We have voting rights under attack across the country. You see it in the big lie trafficked by the former president, who says that there was widespread voter fraud throughout this country, despite the fact that his own Secretary of Homeland Security, the man responsible for our elections in this country, called them in 2020 the safest and most secure in United States history. And he pointed the country's attention, President Trump did, on communities of color. He said, this voter fraud that I've been warning you all about, it's concentrated in Detroit, in Philadelphia, in Atlanta, Georgia, in Phoenix, Arizona, these critically important swing states, whose black voters and voters of color deliver the Electoral College votes and